Thank you so much. So just the mic check here. I can be heard, everyone. All right. First, I'd like to thank Benjamin for the introduction, and I also want to send out a special thank you to Sean Murphy, who is the organizer of 1455, and he has been very, very gracious in inviting me and Jehan to help spotlight Palestinian poetry. Before I start, I want to also recognize that I am sort of broadcasting from traditional Pamunkey Confederation land. I live on the occupied land of the Pamunkey Confederation. And this is really an important thing for me to note, not out of a performative aspect, but especially for someone like me who is deeply interested and invested in critiquing settler colonialism, is to recognize our own position and existence on occupied land, just as we recognize that historic Palestine remains occupied land. So with no further ado, let me just sort of get into it. This is my first Zoominar, leading the first Zoominar, and that's copyright to my lovely partner, Lara Sheehi. And I guess I should introduce myself. My name is Stephen Sheehi, Stephen Sheehi. I'm the director of the Decolonizing Humanities Project at the College of William and Mary in Williamsburg, Virginia. So I'd like to thank Jehan for agreeing to share some of her work with us and have a conversation with us today. She's an incredible friend, and if you don't know Jehan, Jehan Bseiso is I would say one of the most dynamic poetesses or poets around, definitely one of the most amazing Palestinian poets around today. I've known her for ages. She's also, I want to say, regional director of the Middle East for Médecins, Frontières, Doctors Without Borders. So not only is she an incredibly powerful cultural figure, her work is so invaluable to so many people. So she definitely is a 24/7, 364/5, whatever calendar you might go by, a woman. So thank you, Jehan. Ahla wa sahla. There you go.
Yes, Ahlan. Thank you, Stefan. Masal khair, and I'm super happy to be here. And thank you to the team at 1455 for this opportunity. And I'm really happy to see your face on this Zoominar. I'm gonna steal this from now on. To be honest, I haven't done a reading online yet. I feel like we do everything online these days, but this is still something that I find a little bit strange, and I think we're gonna have to get used to it. So thank you for having me here.
Yahala, Yamit Hala. Thanks for coming. So, Inti, would you like to start?
Yes. So we'll start with we're going to start with a poem by Jehan Bseiso. We share the last name and we share the family origins. He's a very well-known writer who comes from Gaza, which is where my family is from. And he lived from 1926 to 1984. This is قصيدة إلى الأسلاك الشائكة, Jehan Bseiso, which translates to a letter to barbed wire. So Stefan and I will be reading this together. لو قدر ألا يلدغ كلماتي ثعبان.
If my words would be spared the serpent's bite.
لو قدر أن لا تتفجر أوراقي ينبوع رماد.
If my papers would not turn to ashes and dust.
لو قدر أن تتسلق كلماتي جبل الأصفاد. لو قدر أن ترسو فوق ضفاف كفك كالمجداف. كاللؤلؤة الهاربة تطاردها الأصداف.
If my poems could climb this mountain of handcuffs, to rest on your palm shores, like a runaway pearl, haunted by clams.
لو قدر أن تنهار كجدار أفاع وكأعمدة من أظفار تلك الأسوار.
If these walls finally collapsed into a sad pile of snakes and fingernails.
لو قدر يا وطني أن ألقاك كالأرض البكر المولودة من قبلة زلزال.
Then I would see you again for the first time, my homeland, born in an earthquake's kiss.
كشراع قد تاه وعاد به الإعصار لسقطت على سيفك يتمزق قلبي من قبلة سيفك وأراك.
Then I would see you again for the first time, my homeland, like a sail lost at the sea that the storm found. Then I would see you again for the first time, my homeland. If only the sword will kiss my heart, my eyes will open.
Thank you, Stefan.
Shukran.
Thank you for sharing that reading with me.
Thank you for translating it. It's beautiful.
Thank you.
So I don't know if you wanted to start reading, or I would ask you about the question, that poem first.
Ask me.
Yeah, so it's an incredibly rich poem, especially in Arabic, because we had gone back and forth a little bit with it, and so I was curious, what about that poem? What about Jehan Bseiso? And obviously, he's part of the bloodline, maybe, but I think there's also more there. So
Yes.
what is it that you feel connected? How does that poem land with you?
So I'll start with a small description of Jehan Bseiso by Mahmoud Darwish. He said that he brought the street into poetry and poetry to the street. Okay. And in that sense, what really spoke to me about this poem is the rich, complex imagery, but at the same time, the materiality and how concrete it is. And it's something that I find incredibly powerful for what could be called political poetry. And actually, that's also something that I find really beautiful. And it's a long-term project for me, but I'm getting to know his work, and maybe some of the poems would be more easily classifiable as like political poetry or political lyric, whereas others would even go into love poems. And I think it's also possible to be in love with good politics.
Right. No, absolutely.
Yes.
I was thinking also about how the piece moves through time. Because Jehan Bseiso, I know he died a while ago, obviously, and I was just curious. I mean, how do you think it can? I mean, here it is, this piece, and how does this also represent sort of the both the sort of Palestinian state of being, but also the role of poetry within that?
Yeah. I thank you for the question. I think that's exactly it. I mean. And this, we're talking today here about memory and forgetting and the contradiction, and how can we remember what we can't forget, and a poem like that just cuts through time like a knife, just like slicing through and remains relevant. Unfortunately, even the title, I almost thought when translating it to call it a love letter to the barbed wire, because it's there's so much emotion, and the images are incredibly rich and powerful. And I just feel like it's always already present. It's not something that expires, and I feel that way about poetry in general.
But I like this also. This when you were talking, this is this complete reaction from me that our conversation before, we were thinking about what poem to open up with, and I think I had told you Abdulatif Aqal's Hub ala Tariq al-Falastiniya, love the Palestinian way, which is also this very, it's a love poem, but it's also a love poem to who you are and where you are. But I think that also sort of curves us back to like affect, like feeling, right? I mean, what is this Palestinian tragedy is that that it is maintained, and Palestinian existence still maintains through the literally the emotional bond that one still has with Palestine, not as a historic place that is gone, but actually a place that exists now that remains occupied, awaiting, and this is the poem, right? Awaiting to be returned to, right?
Exactly.
Awaiting to be seen for the first time again.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And for me, this idea, this return again for the first time, you
Right.
know? How do you return again for the first time? And I think that's something that a lot of Palestinians feel because, I want to share also some of my poems that I've written about places that I haven't been to. And I'm sure, like Gaza, for example, which is where I come from, which is under siege. And I'm sure that the day that I will go back, it will feel like a return for the first time again. And it
Right.
is all those things. Yeah.
Absolutely. So I mean, there's a lot that I want to talk to you about. But before I do, I think it's really important. And then what I love about this festival and what I love about you being here is that it's a place for us to really get dirty with poetry.
Yes.
You know,
Yes.
so I just like, you know, just so let us have it.
Let's get in there.
Let's
So
get
I'm about to say something a little bit sad. July in my memory is seared, is like carved into, because it felt like, I mean, 2009 and then 2014, it just felt like for a while I have a deep memory in my body that summer means the war on Gaza. And in 2014, I was in Amman, which is where I am currently now, although I live in Lebanon. I was in Amman and I was watching the war on Gaza next to my mom on the TV. And something so personal about the coverage of the war stayed with me. And a lot of poems came out of that. And it's also how I process. But it was the reporting. So the drones were hitting in and homes were being targeted. And in the news, the journalists would refer to families, you know? And that really, I'm still not over that. And every summer, it's a reminder because it's a protracted situation. You know, it's an unlivable. The UN has declared Gaza uninhabitable, and yet it is one of the most congested spots on earth. So, what does it mean when an uninhabitable place is is full of people? You know, so I'm going to share a poem called Gaza from the Diaspora, and from the title already you can tell that I'm writing it from far and. It's in two parts. Even from space, Gaza is on fire. Is children sheltering in UNRWA schools hit? Is entire families huddled in hospitals hit? Is you sitting perfectly still in the dark, hoping this one will miss you? From Amman, from Beirut, in Chicago, we online, yes, but no 140 characters this. 1,000 killed, 4,000 injured, thousands displaced, no place. Twitter feeds and Facebook timelines and 10 reasons why you should boycott Israel now and 5 ways children die in Gaza today or how to lose 18 members of your family in 1 minute. At BB54, stop saying the rockets are in the damn hospitals, in the schoolrooms, under the beds of 4-year-olds. Maybe it helps that 8 celebrities expressed their outrage, tweeted and deleted. At CNN, at Fox News, Bess rewriting history, Bess lies on TV. At Jon Stewart, thank you for educating the silent majority with satire. Day 17. What happened? What is still happening? In Jabalia, the dead console the dying. Anisa, with 1 child in her arms and another in her belly, dead. In the hospital, they put the pregnant women alone because they're carrying hope, because they don't want them to see what can happen to children. Oh, white phosphorus and unconfirmed reports of illegal dense inert metal explosives. I can confirm this. International law is clearly for internationals only. By now, a 7-year-old in Gaza has survived 3 wars already, and you're still talking about talks and sending John Kerry to the Middle East and thanking Egypt for facilitating nothing. There's more blood than water today in Gaza. Part 2. Today in Jabalia, Khan Yunis, in Rafah and Shuja'iyya, we're still burying the dead we find, but the living ask, Wayn al-Ruh? Where to now? شو نسوي? What to do now? صامدون. It means we last. Habibi, today you reminded me we under the same sky, but nowhere refuge, only refugees. Skip breakfast with militias in Benghazi, have lunch in Homs under the rubble, leave your house in Mosul, leave your house in Mosul, leave your house in Mosul 3 times in 1 week. Take your body to Beirut, your heart still beating in Aleppo. Take your body to Amman, your heart still beating in Gaza, escape. Take the death boats from Egypt and Libya to Italy. Leave your children on the shore. Arab offspring forecast is very cloudy, with prospects of unseasonal paradigm shift. I don't know politics, but something about this brand of terror tastes like Burger King. Take back your jihadis for hire. Take back your F-16s, your drones, your bombs from the sky in Iraq, in Libya, in Yemen. Dear diaspora, maybe you have a good job. You're happy. You work with Pepsi. You work at Memak and Ogilvy, and you don't know if they'll close the Novartis head office in Beirut tomorrow because another bomb went off. You don't take cabs in Cairo, and you don't want to move to Dubai just like everybody. Dear diaspora, boycott. Don't sponsor occupation with your Jordanian dinars, dirhams, dollars, and pounds sterling. Habibi, I thought you lost my number. Turns out you lost your legs. On the way to the hospital, from Khan Yunis to Jabalia to Rafah, the border is closed, but my heart tunnels. I think we should take a break after this one. No, it's so hard. I've written it a long time ago, and it still makes me really sad, you know. So,
you know, when you're reading it, you know, so you know that the first, you know, kind of, I guess, essential but maybe cliche, I always found it very unhelpful lesson you get when you, as a writer, to write. It's like, who are you writing to, right? Yeah. And to me, the poem is more about where are you writing from, you know? And I think it's such a brilliant and powerful piece because you're writing from this space that is really connected to Gaza, but also Gaza is not it's not suspended in the world, in the kind of suspension that Israel wants it to be. It is still connected to the Arab world.
Absolutely.
So when you talk about the diaspora, you're actually still talking about your connection to this place.
Absolutely.
You know, so yeah, I find it incredibly powerful.
And thank you for saying that. I just want to say as well that I think creating zones of exclusion, although there are, as a space, what Gaza is going through is exceptional, and there are maybe few comparable spots in the world and maybe in history. But at the same time, for us to continue to remember what we can't forget, it needs to be connected, in my opinion, to our geographical imagination, you know? So, and it's a relatable, it's a relatable and relational distance. So like it has to continue to be somewhere habitable, you know,
right.
Even if they tell us it's uninhabitable, it needs
right.
to be somewhere that where our imagination can live, because that's where, okay, I know that we die a material death and our bodies die a material death, but we also die if we fall into forgetfulness and oblivion, and
right.
2 million people, if they fall off the news agenda. And I also write a lot about the news, and I have a very critical approach to coverage, especially one that focuses on anniversaries, you know? So anniversary this, anniversary that, though I fall into the same traps. But I like what you said about not just who you're writing to, but where you're writing from. And that could be also a place in your body, a place in your mind, a place in your heart, a place in your imagination, and also a place that you cannot access. So
right. Well, it's funny because I think you said you wrote this in Amman.
yes.
But also kind of, so I was thinking about two different things. It's just one in terms of the place that you write from. It's like the Jehan that you are and your proximity to Gaza is the same no matter if you're in Amman or Chicago and Tokyo or, or Gaza, right? Because in the end, into your Gazawi, you're from Gaza, right? But I was wondering if you can maybe also talk about real geographic like materiality, that is like how it is to be a Palestinian writing in Amman, looking over. I mean, this is, I remember the first time I ever went to Palestine, and it was from Jordan. And before we had gone across the bridge, I was with my cousin, and they had a place in Salt, or actually Speit or something, up in the mountains, and you can see Palestine, and you're like struck by the proximity. So maybe you could speak to that, like how it is being your proximity to Palestine in your own physical life.
It's incredibly surreal to be where I'm sitting now from my home in Amman. I'm 100 kilometers from Hebron, one of the largest cities of Palestine. And this week, a colleague of mine flew through from Brussels, and a few hours later, she's calling me from Hebron, and I'm in Amman, and it feels technically, and on the map, it's nothing, but it feels like 70 plus years of occupation are between us. So, and it's true, and that's what the distance feels like. So you see the numbers on the map and the Google Maps and all this, and it's a lie. Because you know that you're gonna need the right papers, and you know that you're gonna need permissions, and you know that there are layers of differentiation and segregation getting in the way. It doesn't matter what the map says. But at the same time, and I traveled through Palestine. Actually, the first time I ever visited was 2012, and that year I had gone 6 times to Afghanistan, and as part of my work, and I just lost it. Like I couldn't accept what you're asking me now about, which is being in physical proximity, but being so far and having this difficulty of access. So, and on one of my trips, I was looking at this app by this anti-Zionist Israeli organization called Zogrot, and they have this map where you can travel all over historical Palestine. So the bus is going around moving, and the map pulls up these names of villages that have been erased, names of areas like Lifta, where my grandmother comes from in Jerusalem, which is still, by the way, restored. I mean, it's one of those villages that has been demolished, half demolished, So that's it, the lie of the map, of the physical map.
I know we might have some Liftawiyin here. Shout out.
Shout out to anybody from Lifta.
It's funny because, I want to get more back to your poetry to hear more, but before I can maybe kind of give you leading questions about that are completely like about my own perspective and not yours. So feel free to invalidate me. But so I hear what you're saying is completely right, and that's this idea again, like you're saying, like that there's a political geography here that has been imposed through settler colonialism, and that's what it's all about, right? And here you are, but when you're just really a stone's throw, literally a stone's throw from Palestine, right? But also when you're in Amman, what struck me and has always struck me is going down the street and stopping in the can and buying a pack of gum. And you start talking to the shop owner, and he happens to be, from, he maybe ex-PLO or whatever. He came over, and in '67 he was caught on the wrong side of the border, right? So there's this like really living history that it's not just a sort of like, okay, yeah, things suck, yeah, it was, and now there's a political reality. Sorry, right? There's this like, no, man, like this is like these are the people who live there, right? So it's not just this sort of memory that is abstract.
Absolutely.
And I feel that there's a lot of that. And I think that I'm thinking about, I guess, the Nakba poem, break, help me with the title, but
Which one?
The very early one with the hyphen.
Mine?
Yes.
Brainstorming Nakba.
Brainstorming.
Yeah.
I also break
yes, exactly.
Nakba. So this sort of idea that it's like, it's very present. It's not just being lost in time, right? That in Amman, you're still circulating through Palestine.
Absolutely. Absolutely. But that's it. I mean, I try also with my writing to, when I connect it to also the mundane, the everyday, the relatable, because at the end of the day, I speak about this sometimes, which is like the big life and the little life, and and in the big life is justice and is freedom and is all those things, and sometimes we have to tend to the little life, and they often intersect, and I think that so many people have sacrificed themselves to the big life, and we owe them a major debt, but the road is long, in my opinion, and we will only make it if we keep, that's a personal opinion, and I have lots of discussions about this. I think we will only make it if we keep the big life, which for me is one that includes freedom for Palestinians, intersecting with my small life, which includes, my own personal little happinesses wherever they lie. So yeah.
So maybe we can get.
Maybe I'll read. Yeah. So I have a very strange relationship with Ghassan Kanafani, and I just want to say thank you to Nagwa Ibrahim, who is hopefully still listening and who's saying that it's interesting. If you have questions, please shout. So I have this bit complicated relationship status with Ghassan Kanafani, who is an activist, a writer, and one of the major figures of Palestinian resistance, and someone who I think straddled perfectly this, how to exist as a journalist, as a writer, as an activist, all at the same time. So as a child, I was very confused because I thought we had the same birthday, and I will read the poem now because it reveals a few things about my relationship to Kanafani. So this is a letter to Ghassan Kanafani on the 66th anniversary of the Nakba. Dear Ghassan, on our birthday this year, I turned 31 and you turned 78. Even the dead grow old without a homeland. Do you know that we live and die in diaspora now? Do you know that Palestinian refugee camps are swollen with Iraqis and Syrians now? Too many jihadi songs end with the refrain, for Palestine. But Baba says terrorists can't read maps. The march to Jerusalem doesn't start from Kunduz, and I definitely cannot see Haifa from Cairo, Ya Ansar Bayt al-Maqdis. Last week in Beirut, I went to the races for the first time, and I bet $5 on a horse named Saura. She lost. But I met a little boy who said he was from Sabra. In Jordan, Syrian children say they come from Za'atari and Azraq, not anymore Homs or Hama. Little boys shouldn't come from refugee camps. Dear Ghassan, I've been thinking a lot about whether it's easier to start and stay with nothing than to lose everything from one day to the next. Always already without. 66 years expelled. Pain is fresh in Syria, Lebanon, Egypt, Libya, but our story is old. I was 9 when I first realized I shared my birthday with someone else. On the 9th of April each year, the public library ran dotty black and white reels of your life, and afterwards, we had cake. I was always curious why you were not showing up at our birthday party. Only years later, I realized it was a commemoration, not a celebration, or a little bit of both. Dear Ghassan, I feel the same way about the Nakba. Every day Nakba. Each year marks death, dispossession, and occupation, but also birth, and the celebration of memory and resistance. Yours, Jehan. Thank you.
I love. Wow. So when was this written?
This was written in
Give your year.
2014.
What's that?
2014.
14. Okay.
Yeah.
No one's calculating your age.
Yeah. No, I'm happy to say.
No ageism here. Yeah, I mean, it's really great because I think there's there's definitely this theme. Again, I can see how your work as a aid worker also is really seeps really into your worldview and your art and your voice as a poet. The line that the jihadi doesn't read maps is interesting because it's also though, like, what are these maps that we are reading, right? The maps that we are reading are drawn by Sykes-Picot and
Exactly.
the United States and the state that is now known as Israel, which has no borders technically, right? But your work is migrating. I know that, again, just in the first poem you had read too, it was really about this migrating circulating between Gaza, Sabra, Za'atari, Homs,
absolutely,
Mosul. And maybe you could speak to that, like you then as an Arab poet.
Yeah. I'm a bit pan-Arab on this, and it's and I have a lot of political critique of that approach, but and that political school. But somehow, I know this sounds really cheesy, but I have personally felt at home everywhere I've traveled in the Arab world, and I've been to Iraq, to Syria, to Libya. And during very difficult times, Egypt, and as a Palestinian, Jordan and Lebanon, obviously, but as a Palestinian, you carry your identity like, a fragile egg, and you offer it to people, and or a vase or something, and you don't want it to break because it'll create a mess. And you're just, okay, I'll put my identity right here on this table. Please don't knock it off, or you're gonna make a mess, I know. So all these spaces, and I'm trying also never to be clear, but never to apologize, and to to be concise, but also to be meaningful. So it's a lot. But this thing about terrorists can't read maps is also. So it's a reference on Sar Bayt al-Maqdis, which is a jihadi and terrorist group. I have a major problem with this word, the way how this word is used in the Western press and in the Western imaginary. But they've killed a lot of people in Egypt for Palestine. And also there was this affiliate of ISIS and even an affiliate of the Taliban that also killed a lot of people in Afghanistan for Palestine. And this was a bit of a comment that I was making on the tokenism and on the dangerous liaison and the dangerous connections that some of these groups were making with Palestine, and that's how I was trying to, a bit through the poem, create a sense of distance, and because I don't use a word like terrorist just easily, like left and right, because I think it's a majorly abused, and our patients as Doctors Without Borders are sometimes called terrorists, and we treat them. So it's a very abused word. I don't use it lightly.
Right.
So,
I think that's really heavy, because I know what you said. There's a lot there. I mean, and I think it could be, in my mind at least, sort of summarized as like the weight you carry as a Palestinian, right? On one hand, it's super important for us to understand that we are Arab and that we are connected. But on the other hand, it's like there's this constant process of translation, which actually makes me think maybe more about why you write in English. I don't know. Yeah.
You're decolonizing the humanities. I'm a product of a colonial education, of post-colonial education.
I taught there.
Had you? I mean, you just got to me first. No, this is actually, and I've had conversations with a Lebanese poet friend of mine. Her name is Zeina Hashim Bek, and she writes beautifully. And recently, in the last few years, she's also started to write. She used to write in English only, and now she's writing in English and Arabic. personally, I love this quote by Samuel Beckett, and I'll say it even in French. He says, to be a stranger in language, être un étranger dans la langue. Okay, so he taught himself French. He's Irish, but he was Irish. He taught himself French in order to be a stranger in the language and to kind of nudge it with your elbows a little bit to make it uncomfortable. And although I would love to write in Arabic, and it's something that I'm working on, and this project of translating Ma'in is like my doorway, I believe, I hope. I also am more and more comfortable sitting how I sit in English, you know? And there are amazing authors. So there's Ocean Vuong, he's of Vietnamese origin. He's the first person in his family to I think, graduate from or university, or even be I lost the word, literacy. He's the first, yes, literate. Okay. And then there's Ilya Kaminsky as well from the Soviet Union. These writers writing in English who are just comfortable showing up in English, how they show up in English. And this idea, and I don't know if it makes sense or if you can relate, but I no longer feel like I have to write perfectly in English. And there was such a burden growing up and through our education systems to get English right. Don't really care at this moment.
Right. No, absolutely. Yeah, that's awesome. Well, do you want to, we want to hog up more of your poetry if you're willing to share it with us.
Yes, absolutely. Let me think. So, yeah, I'll read this one. How are we doing for time? Good. So, this is another Gaza poem. It's heavy. I mean, I focused on Gaza for this reading. And this is, I was mentioning to you that I'm a bit suspicious of anniversaries and because they're permission to forget. You know, I really like as well thinking about memory and its relationship to forgetting. And I think that anniversaries and, you know, United Nations Day of the Woman, Day of the Refugee, and all of these things, they're just permission for us to forget the rest of the year. And, you know, it's problematic because at the same time, you know that people are paying attention on those days, so you need to use them, but they are permission to forget. So this is on, I wrote this on the second or third actual anniversary of the Gaza war, and it's called #Gaza. And I remember the digital or social media guy in my team got very upset because he thinks that, you know, I'm too hard on social media. To the children who lost their lives and the parents who had to bury them. Bring your camera. Bring your candles and spotlights to highlight. Bring your focus to #anniversary. Every day Gaza. Bring your reporters, your journalists, your moving infographics. Write. Abu Muhammad sits on the balcony cradling the head of Muhammad. Sorry, the photo of the head of Muhammad. Talk about bomb shelters and war sirens in Sderot and Tel Aviv. Call it neutrality. Talk about your 5 dead and your Iron Dome. Call it objective reality. Bring your billion-dollar pledges and your aid caravans, your Excel sheets, monitoring reports, and donor requirements. Call it accountability. Write. Abu Muhammad sits on the balcony hopelessly, smokes a hopeless cigarette, talks about lack of hope. This one is human interest story. And when we invite you into our rubble homes for tea and bread, you call it generosity. And when we are strong about our suffering, you call it resilience. Right, 51 days, 2,000 dead, 10,000 wounded. Abu Muhammad says, my boys, they took a ball to the beach, came back bodies. How can we remember what we can't forget?
Allah.
I wanted to read this one because it links to the title of the conversation that we're having, and also this very powerful event with the death of the 4 Abu Bakr boys, or Bakri boys, on the beach in Gaza, and they were literally playing football.
Right.
And it takes something like that and testimonies of journalists filling the Guardian, Independent, you know, because it happened right next to what was apparently, because I've never been there, but you know, like a journalist hub, and it took that amount of witnessing for this story.
Right. Right. So I don't want to lose the moment, so, but because there's a couple of things I want to explore with you. But before I do, I just want to encourage everyone who's here. If you have questions, please feel free to ask them. We're gonna be aiming to end. I mean, we're pretty flexible, but we were thinking around you know, quarter of maximum. So we have 20-30 minutes. But so please feel free to ask. You know, just, I don't want to, again, I want to go back to that. And there are a couple of things I hear, and I think your desire to constantly platform Gaza is parallel to our, as you said, our need to constantly platform Palestine, Palestine, and not as a day of remembrance, a day of rage, a day of the land, but every day, right? Mm-hmm. So maybe, can you talk about, so someone who works, so you know, for the audience, I'm not Lebanese, I'm not Palestinian, I'm Lebanese. So, but my you know, my own work on Palestine, you know, it's hard to try to always make sure Gaza is there, because precisely for the reasons of what the colonial settler apparatus does, which is it's trying to suffocate it, it's trying to make it disappear, it's trying to make it inaccessible. So maybe could you talk about the difficulties in platforming Gaza even within the Palestinian cultural sphere?
Yeah.
Right, you know, because like, okay, everybody, I mean, but in Palestine, we were also, you know, annexation, Jerusalem, yada, 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 yada. So there's so much going on that if they're not bombing Gaza, we tend to forget it.
I understand. So I was telling you before that I'm a part of the production team of something called the Palestine Festival of Literature, which is an annual touring festival that started with writers and poets, but then branched out into journalists, dramatists, and architects, filmmakers. You know, we had 2 years ago, it was focused on architecture. We had an architectural lens. And when we're planning the program and trying to see, first of all, the amount of logistics, you know, it's called the Palestine Festival of Literature, but the amount of logistics you need to do to bring anything, and specifically education, you know, interaction, information within Palestine, to access the border, to access the checkpoints, to find the right venue, to find a way to move with all these different nationalities of people. That alone, I mean, the logistics of bringing the culture of power over power, the power of culture over the culture of power, you know, to get that culture in, is a huge struggle. And I'm also not saying that, you know, we're importing it, you know, from outside. It's more because Palestine, Gaza is under siege, so it's more easy to see. Okay, we cannot go in and out, we cannot exchange, etc. But actually, there are certain books that can't get into Palestine. There's this bookshop in Haifa called Fattoush. They recently, last year, I think end of last year, they had books that were not able to get across the border. So that's what I mean when we say information, exchange. So Gaza is under siege, obviously, but all of Palestine is controlled and occupied, and that's what it means. So just to say on this point, you know, because Gaza is inaccessible to Palestinians who are even living in Palestine, it's a real struggle to continue to make sure that it's present, you know, and often it's an absent present or a present absence, you know. but how to work it into programming, how to even, and I'm sorry I come back on this, but logistics is, the struggle is real. You know, if you're going to do a stream with writers and poets from Gaza, and how do you make sure that they're not, now we're all the awkward faces on the screen, but before, because now everything is online, but before you would have a physical audience and you'd have someone from Gaza on a screen. So it's always a bit removed, a bit distant, a bit far. I'll end with just an example from something I faced personally. In 2016, I was part of the Festival of Literature and we were crossing, and I had a colleague, a writer, Ahmed Masoud. He's Palestinian, he's carrying a British passport. He comes from Gaza, and he was the only one that was not allowed entry because he had a Gaza ID. So they did not allow him entry to Palestine. So they told him, you're from Gaza, you cannot get into Palestine. Like, you know, that's, you know, it's, so he was sent back. And there are people, I hear when I'm in Palestine, I hear stories like the people in Gaza dream about Jerusalem, like as if it's Neverland. You know, they could go to Sweden and not go to Jerusalem if they're from Gaza, because if they get a scholarship, etc. It's very challenging.
But on the other hand, too, you know, I knew though that Gaza has a banging cultural scene. I mean, rap is blown up there.
Music, theater.
Some of the best rap, you know, theater, you know, poetry. I was wondering, Laura and I are writing a book, and we actually talk about Yunus Muhammad, a poet who actually killed himself, who was
Yes.
actually one of these up and coming poets. And
yes,
I was wondering, are you connected with that what's going on, that scene?
Yeah.
I mean, I think,
go ahead.
No, I was just saying, because I'm always like not pleasantly shocked, but really happy when I get to Palestine. And again, when I'm in Palestine, it's, you know, it's all but Gaza. But people kind of, they really do the work sometimes to kind of listen to what's going on there. Who's writing poetry, short stories, rap, music, you know.
There's a lot. I know that there's a lot of amazing music, and I'm trying to keep up with it. I'm also in touch with some students from universities. I'm also in touch with young female journalists who are incredible,
Right.
you know. And I also know because even through MSF teams, like Doctors Without Borders teams, that we have a lot of nurses and doctors as well, you know, brilliant Gazan men and women who are part of our teams and part of our efforts. So I'm probably not as switched or clued in. Just again, you know, it's hard to find the information, and when it's there, it's hard to connect, and they don't have the platforms. And I think they have to. It's kind of the burden of not only being talented and having something to offer, but also
Access.
building your own platform, having the burden to also come with your own platform.
Right.
But I know that music is really something.
Yeah, I'm going to give a shout out to Revolution Makers. They're an amazing rap band, incredible.
Oh, wow.
I wanted to ask about gender, but before we do, we have a couple questions. Let me ask one by Kara first, and then maybe you could do
Sure.
another reading before. We could at least have time for one or two more poems.
Sure.
Thank you, Kara, for offering the question. I'm just going to read it. Thank you for sharing such beautiful and powerful poetry. What is the best way for us to read more of your work? And what are other Palestinian writers who are writing in or have been translated into English would you recommend for those of us who are new to Palestinian literature?
Okay, so I'll start with not my work. So there's this anthology called Modern Palestinian Writing. It's translated by Naomi Shihab Nye, who's half Palestinian and poet laureate, I think, last year. So it's an anthology called Modern Palestine Poetry. For my poetry, I have actually, if you get my book, you get to read two other amazing writers, so Ramzi Baroud and Samah Sab'awi. So the book is called I Remember My Name, and it's poetry by Samah Sab'awi, Ramzi Baroud, and myself. And all the Gaza poems that I read here tonight are all included there, plus a few more. I'm not talking about it here and now, but I also write a lot about refugees. And 2019, I co-edited with a professor from Boston University a book called Making Mirrors, and it's called Writing/Writing. I think it's quite, I like the title, so I'll explain it. So writing as in writing, W, the act of writing, but also /writing, which is making right, by and for refugees. So, and it has some incredible people in it. I will not list them. They're incredible writers. You should check it out. And we did literature, we did poetry workshops in Athens, in Palestine, in some of the places where some poets were stuck and on the move. And we have poems from very established people like Naomi Shihab, Sharif El-Musa, Izena Hashim, together with first-time writers. So check it out. It's not about Palestine, but that's what I was trying to say. Everything is connected.
Hello. That's the writing and writing. There's also a really great article by Rana Barakat on settler colonialism, who's the Liftawi that I gave a shout out to.
Oh, really?
So
okay.
Yeah, there's these synergies happening.
Nice.
So before I get to Lara's question, maybe you want to share with us a little more of your work.
So a last poem as we close. So I'll read this one. It's I wrote this poem for my grandmother a long time ago. It's called Tata's Love Song. So Tata means my grandmother. So it says, Maktub, it is written. Where? In a big book in the sky. Tata, my grandmother, would only tell the story in staccato. 1948, Palestine, orange blossom fields, salt, blue Gaza waters, tears in her long black lashes. And when my father died, his horse wept in the funeral. Inhale, Sykes-Picot, Exodus, memory, shrapnel, Black September, blue ribbons on bloody chests, Allahu Akbar. Exhale, settlements, walls, Katyushas, Mahmoud Darwish, Che Guevara's lips, Jerusalem, Maryam, Kufiya. On TV, an artist says to the BBC camera, this is postmodern. It's actually Andy Warhol meets Baudrillard, who looks at Jalaluddin Rumi while Derrida looks on. The theme is keys, like existential symbols. These people left with their keys around their necks. It's three-dimensional. Denial, delusion, difference. The photos are taken from maximum empathy angles. You feel what they feel. Woman stares at the BBC camera, says, I'm from Hebron. My house is at the corner of the big street. You know which one I'm talking about? The one with the flower shop and Abu Ali's bakery next to the girls' high school. You have to taste Abu Ali's bread. Take two. My name is Samia. I walked from Hebron to Jerusalem to Jordan, and these are my keys. I hope to go back someday. Abu Ali, if you're watching this, I just want to say that I've never tasted bread like yours. Take three. My name is Samia. I told you I left Hebron in the dead of night with a small parcel tied around my belly and my keys in a necklace around my neck. One day, I hope to go back to, get out of my face, get out of my face. This trilogy has only two parts, beginning and end. I put my head on your chest and wait for the summer to become winter again. Poppies in our hair, elegies on our lips.
Wow. I think that might be my favorite. I love that. I really love that. Thank you. And I was thinking about a couple of things. I really love that a lot, actually. I'm still kind of like turning it over, and I just, in many ways, it's the most personal piece,
Yes.
and
Yes.
that intimacy is so beautiful, but it's also so connected, and I was thinking, on one hand, the sort of the plight of the Palestinian is that when Palestinians are visible, they're only visible and when they become subjects of empathy and pity, and that means they're dead and gone.
Exactly.
And we pity them. But also there's a real struggle of like, this woman is obviously still a subject of history who's eating this bread, and it's like, this shit is real, dude. Like, fuck you. I'm not a soda. I'm not a picture. I'm not a date in history. This is like, my fucking bakery is right down the street. Shut the fuck up.
Exactly.
But also I was in this like other Zoominar, thank you Lara Sheeha for that word, and Rafif Ziadi was talking, and she said that something to the effect of like, by our ancestors remembering, they sort of did the work for us to remember, right? That the sort of like, by our ancestors, we have remembered, because they have remembered, we have remembered.
And that's why we have to keep remembering.
Right.
So it's a responsibility. So
yeah, that's really great, and I love that because, there's an idea, I think, with the idea of memory is, and I think you actually say this in some of your poetry, this idea of like nostalgia and identity and everything just becomes reified as this nostalgia, but it's not. It's a passing down of something real that still exists, right? It's not a passing down of the memory that, is gone. Which is great. So is your Taita, she's
with us on the 5th floor of where I'm sitting now.
She's looking down on you from the 5th floor.
Yes, no, she's amazing. We have the same name. Yeah.
Okay.
No, I agree. I mean, it's a very personal poem, and I always try to. I mean, they all feel personal to me, but I guess some of them have become more distant than others. But this one definitely still feels like very close to where, because when you write a poem, you first put it in a place and then you keep moving it around. So, but this one is still where I left it, like last time. I can find it.
No, it's so immediate, and it really shines through the beauty of that love, and that just, it's so connected. I am going to ask my darling partner for forgiveness. I'm going to skip over her question only because my dear friend Emily Drumsta is here, who's a brilliant scholar of Arabic literature at Brown, and I'm going to just read her question, and you can maybe answer it. Thank you both. You're welcome so much for this beautiful work, and thanks for starting with this amazing poem by Jehan Bseiso, which I didn't know before. It seems like there's a structure of interwoven remembering and forgetting in the Arabic grammar of Bseiso's poem itself. The shart, jawab al-shart construction there, law, we have to remember the conditions and the ifs if we're eagerly to anticipate the answer, the conclusion, and the thens. Is there a way that the Arabic grammatical features like this inflect your own English language poetry?
Is there a way? Can you share the last part? Because that's such a beautiful, I feel like I journeyed in this question. I went on like a place and I came back. So can you just,
Emily's so smart. Emily's so smart. I just live in her shadow. She's great. So yeah, I feel you. Is there a way that Arabic grammatical features like this inflect your English language poetry? And I guess there's like, you're writing in Arabic, but you're writing in English, but you're really writing in Arabic.
Yeah,
you're really writing in Arabic.
Yeah,
right?
Absolutely. And I'm still working on this. I mean, I just feel like Arabic has much more layers, than English does, and I don't think I'm the first to feel this way. But definitely, as a non-native English speaker and as a native Arabic speaker, whatever I write in English is not too far from all the different layers that Arabic brings. That's how I feel.
Right.
So yeah.
Right. So I'm going to ask
And
you.
and I just want to say, I'm really glad you didn't know this poem. I just would like to tell her, I'm very happy you didn't know this poem. And part of what we're doing is, what I'm going to be working on is making sure these poems are out there by Jehan Bseiso.
Great. Definitely.
So thank you.
Forward to that. No, awesome.
Great. And I just want to say thank you. I know we're out of time. I just want to say thank you to you.
Awesome.
Zoominar is super weird, but it was so good to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much.
Thank you.
And before we end, I'm going to put you on the spot and ask, do you have one poem to take us home?
One poem to take us home. Let me see.
Yeah. And it means you look, and I'll think, just again, I want to thank everybody. And apologies to my dearest Lara for not getting to your question. And thank you, Sean Murphy. Afterwards, at 4 o'clock for 455, immediately in this track, there is Sean Murphy's talking to Angie Kim, the author of the national bestseller of Miracle Creek, and she's a Asian American author who's super great. And also there is another performance by my own colleague Francis Aguas, who's a professor of theater at William and Mary, and he's producing another performance at 4, I believe. Yes, at 4 o'clock, called Drinking with Dad. So stay tuned. But I definitely want to thank you, Jehan, and
thank you.
let's hear what you take us home and
I see some.
feed our souls.
I will. So I chose a very short one. It's a re. So it's like when you write in an email and you go re to reply. So it's a reply to, and this is a real article title. Newspaper article. Re. So reply to cemeteries in Palestinian camps short on space. Daily Star, 16th of May 2012. Okay, and so the cemeteries are full. In Lebanon, Jordan, Syria, and Gaza, we will soon bury Palestinians above ground. Nowhere to live, and now no quiet place to die with dignity. Raise high the beams, carpenters, death architects. Soon your walls will reach the sky. So yeah, and
it's important. Not going to let us go. You're not going to let us go with some happy bullshit. Hey, this is EM at COVID, and we're
yeah. Sorry.
You got to remember. So I need to thank you, and thank you, Negwa, also for your wonderful comments.
Sure. I'll write my email because Negwa, you're asking about the contact. Please feel free to drop me an email. Here's my email, and thank you. Thank you so much for you, and thank you for this chance, and thanks to those who listened in.
Thank you, the best.
Have a beautiful evening.
نشوفك قريبا وhope we see you in the real world.
Absolutely.
Bye bye. يعطيك العافية.
انت كمان.
Thank you all for attending.